Welcome to Champion Minded, the podcast for those who aim for excellence, not only in the sports arena, but in life. My name is Allistair, author, speaker, mindset and performance coach, and my goal is to help you unleash your unlimited potential and provide you with the tools to achieve greatness. Are you ready to become champion minded? Then let's do this. In this episode of What It Takes, I'm talking to Dr. Darren Burgess, the high performance manager at Melbourne FC. Now, I've obviously been following Darren for some time, and he's someone I've looked up to in my career, someone that has a resume that's just incredible. The amount of clubs, the amount of teams, top athletes he's worked with, the experiences he's had. He's been at the World Cup as well. So super excited to get him on the podcast. Darren is currently the high performance manager at Melbourne Football Club. Prior to this appointment, he was the director of high performance at Arsenal Football Club in London. He was the high performance manager at Port Adelaide Football, that's AFL, and head of fitness and conditioning at Liverpool. From 2008 until 2010, Darren was employed as head of sports science for Football Federation Australia, as well as the Australian soccer team's fitness coach. This included also the 2010 World Cup in South Africa, which we get into on the podcast, and Darren shares some of his experiences from that as well. Darren has previously worked as head of high performance at Port Adelaide Football Club, that's AFL, and assistant fitness coach with the Sydney Swans. Like I said, I could go on and on here with the amount of things and the amount of experiences that Darren has done. But at this moment, his current role at Melbourne involves the leadership and management of performance, that's fitness, strength, and nutrition, medical, physiotherapy, injury rehabilitation, and injury rehabilitation, and analysis as well. That's video, statistics, etc. Now, when I spoke to Darren, he was actually in Queensland, where the AFL are having their training hub and their competition at the moment. So he shares a little bit about that, and obviously with the challenges with regards COVID, obviously there's more of a condensed schedule. So he talks about that. That's obviously the AFL Aussie rules. We also talk about mentors that he's had throughout the years, how he first got into the performance industry. He gives some advice for younger coaches and trainers out there. He shares with us some of his failures, which is pretty cool. Obviously, he talks about his time with the Australian Football Federation and at the World Cup. He shares some experiences at Liverpool, where he was managed under Brendan Rodgers, Roy Hodgson, Kenny Dalglish. So he just shares a little bit about them as well. Obviously, the players he worked with there at that time, Fernando Torres, Luis Suarez. So someone that's worked with the best of the best. He also worked at Arsenal as well, football club under Arsene Wenger, so he shares some of the experiences there as well. And then, like I said, it went very fast. I definitely want to have him back on the podcast again for part 2. But he shares at the end some of the books he's reading, some of the podcasts he's listening to, and some other good stuff as well. So guys, I know you're going to enjoy this one. Again, thank you so much to everyone who leaves a comment or a rating on iTunes or on YouTube. I greatly appreciate it. But let's get on with this episode. This is Darren Burgess. So, Darren, welcome to the Champion Minded podcast.
Cheers, Allistair. Great to be on here. Love what you do for the industry, and it's a real honour to be on here.
Cheers, man. Likewise. You're definitely someone that I've wanted to get on here for a while, so super pumped finally to do it. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you're in Queensland at the moment.
I am. I'm in Maroochydore, which is on the Sunshine Coast. It's a stunning part of the world, and I normally come up here for holidays. So to come here and be based here to work for, we've been here for more or less a month now, and potentially another 8 weeks, depending on how good we are. It's a necessity, but it's and it's tough in a lot of ways because I'm living out of a hotel room.
But hold on a second, you're not there on vacation at the moment. You're there with the AFL, right?
Yeah, they're here with the team that I work for called the Melbourne Demons, and we've been based up here because Melbourne has been hit pretty hard by COVID, and so the league moved pretty much all the teams up here to Queensland, where the numbers are really low, and so we're here playing our games in a slightly condensed, unique schedule for AFL. So it's been really busy, but it's nice to be in a place where in winter it's sort of 25, 26 degrees. So, yeah, it's tough in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways it's good to get the league underway to give supporters and to keep people in jobs if we're completely honest.
Yeah. So where are most of the matches being based out of? Are they being based out of Brisbane Lions?
Yeah, the Brisbane's and Gold Coast Stadium hosting most of the games. Adelaide teams are flying in and out of there in one day, and also there's some games going on in Perth. But I think there's 15 teams, more or less 15 teams being based in Queensland. So yeah, it's pretty hectic and a lot of challenges.
Yeah, I'm sure. So is it pretty much the same situation as the NBA basketball? Right now, they're all in Orlando. All the teams are based at a resort right now, and they're the condensed league. Is it more or less the same thing?
It's a little bit different in that in Queensland there's probably there's some teams in Brisbane, there's teams in Gold Coast, teams on the Sunshine Coast, and teams shortly to move to Cairns. And to give you a perspective of the size of Queensland, if I was to drive from where we are now on the Sunshine Coast to Cairns, where we have to play in a couple of weeks' time, it'd be about a 20-hour drive.
Good gracious.
So, so there's a bunch of teams about to be relocated up there to play some games as well. So not quite in the same resort, but we share the resort that we're in now with Collingwood. And I think one other team is going to come in here. So it's a little bit different, but by the same token, most of us will do anything to get the league up and running. So the AFL have done really well, and the players and families and everything have committed a lot to get it up and going. So, like I said, it has its challenges, but we like to see them more as opportunities than challenges.
So obviously, I mean, this is a first that this is happening. Hopefully it's a last as well with this COVID situation. But what challenges has there been for you, especially within the performance department during something like this?
I guess the main challenge, Allistair, is the condensed fixture schedule. So I'll give you an example. We play on Saturday against the Western Bulldogs, and then we have a 7-day break, which is typical in the AFL. But we're going to fly from Brisbane to Alice Springs, where it's going to be, in the centre of Australia, stupidly hot, on the day of the game. So we'll get an hour and a half, 2-hour bus ride to Brisbane, 2.5-hour flight to Alice Springs, play that night, and then get back here at sort of 4 a.m. The Sunday morning. And then we've only got a 4-day break until we go up to Cairns, where it's also going to be probably around 30 degrees. Fly up there on the day of the game, again a 2.5, 3-hour flight. Play up there, stay there for 3 days, only have a 3-day break in between games until we play another game up there, and then have a 4-day break where we come back and play here. Now, typically in the AFL, if teams have a 6-day break, people start to panic a bit that that's too short because of the physicality of the game. But we've got, significant travel on the day of games and significant temperature issues, as well as really shortened schedules. So the injury rates across the league have been sort of through the roof. But that's the way that the league has done it. So there's that schedule. There's a schedule that's a challenge. And then coaching, the coaches want extra time with players to get, skills and tactics and formations and things like that in place. So it's managing the coach expectation. And then finally, it's the players. The players are under a fair bit of stress. They're not sure next year. There's probably going to be a reduced salary cap, so reduced list sizes, and everybody's trying to prove themselves, and they're away from families and friends, and they've got families and friends who are in severe lockdown in Melbourne, so that's creating extra stress. Coaches, families and kids are getting homeschooled. So there's a whole range of issues that are all at play here. We have players who aren't getting a game. Touch wood, our injury list is pretty good at the moment, so that adds to a lot of stress because they're not getting any chance to show their skills. So there's managing those players who are worried about contracts and things like that. And we have a coach who was under significant pressure as well coming into this season. This team came second last year. We're doing a lot better than that so far this year, but there's a couple of really big games going. So there's challenges everywhere I look, Allistair, but I like to see them as opportunities, and it's a genuinely exciting time to be, to tackle these challenges head on with the high performance team that we've got here.
Well, they're very, very lucky to have a guy like yourself, obviously one of the most experienced guys in the business. So they've definitely got the best man for the job there. Just quickly, because there's obviously a lot of other things I'd like to get onto, and I know your time is limited because you've got a full day ahead of you there. Explain AFL quickly. How not the game, but is it two halves? Is it four quarters? Excuse my, especially here in the States, we're not too familiar with it.
No problem at all. It's four quarters that go for about 25 minutes each. They've actually shortened them a little bit this year in anticipation of shorter games, so that was a pretty smart move by the league. But essentially, it's four quarters of 25 minutes each with 5 minutes at quarter time, and you get a good 20 minutes at half time. It's a 360-degree game, so you can get sort of tackled from any angle. Obviously, there's no pads or anything like that. In terms of physicality, the guys will go through anywhere between sort of 10 to 12K, anywhere between sort of 1,000 to 2,500 meters of high speed, and our top guys will get 600 meters of sprint distance, and we classify that as over 7 meters a second. Not everyone does that, of course. One of the good things about AFL is there's a diverse range. We've got guys that are sort of 5'8", 5'9", and other guys that are 6'7", 6'8". So there's a full range of people that play, but very physical game, a lot of contact.
It is.
And so the recoveries, we've been using everything we can in between games to get people recovered for the next game. So that's essentially the brief rundown of the game.
Well, anybody who's listening who doesn't know the game, check. Just go onto YouTube, put in AFL Aussie rules, and it has to be one of the most physically enduring sports that's on a field, because, like you just said there's four quarters of 25 minutes. The field is pretty big as well, isn't it? It's like a big oval.
It is, yeah. Yeah, it's about 180 meters long by probably 130, 140 meters wide.
Gee, that's big.
So it's a big field. Certainly, in my opinion, Allistair, it's the most physically demanding of the field sports. So, so it's a challenge. But one of the great things about AFL, it's only played in Australia, of course. I know there's sort of spot leagues around the place, but they're mainly expats. Is the respect that the coaches and the industry has for sports medicine, sports science, is high. So that has certainly helped, and for people like yourself and myself and practitioners around the place, it's certainly the best league to work in, because you do have a real ownership of the program, of the impact on everything from recruitment to team selection to certainly training loads, to player buy-in. It's as good as anything that I've seen. European rugby is right up there as well, but across the league, it's a real pleasure to work in the AFL because of the impact that you can have on players, coaches, and performance.
I was there, I think, last year, and I was actually at the Brisbane Lions, and I visited the Broncos and so on. But Selwyn, I'm sure you know Selwyn at the Lions.
Really well.
Yeah, he was gracious enough to invite me there and just show me around the facility and watch one of the practices, and most enjoyable. A lot of respect. It was the first time. Actually, I did catch a game as well. The Brisbane Lions were playing that Saturday. Yeah, so. Thoroughly enjoyed it. So anyway, moving on. Let's go back to the start of how you first got into the performance industry, because I know there's going to be a lot of young trainers, a lot of young practitioners, sports scientists, whatever, that are going to be listening to this, that all love to be in the position you are, or have been, for example, working with Arsenal, Liverpool, the Australian football team as well. So how did it start for you? How did you get into the industry?
I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I've said this once or twice before. Most people sort of say, I was an athlete, and I got injured, and then got got interested in the strength and conditioning. So I was just never good enough. I wanted to be in sport, but I was just never good enough. So I thought the next best chance would be to study something like this. So one of the early adopters of a sports science degree, so this is going back to 1993, so showing my age, and
Still
did
young.
a sports science degree. Yeah. And got into the industry that way. Just volunteered for a bunch of different clubs. If I listed them all for you, where I didn't get paid a cent while I was delivering pizzas and working in gyms and doing personal training and things like that for many, many years. I didn't get my first full-time job till I was 29 in fact. All my mates were out working as teachers or accountants or policemen and women, and earning good salaries. It took me a long while. So it was a graft, but thoroughly enjoyed it. Truly, there's been rarely a day where I haven't enjoyed the industry. So that's essentially how I started. I wanted to do some extra study, so I went and did a PhD, and I think that really helped me in terms of a decent understanding of stats and appropriate processes to evaluate and assess players and teams. That really helped me along the way. That's pretty much how I started. I got lucky early on with a couple of roles when there wasn't too many around in the industry, and just kind of nagged my way into roles, and then was given a couple of really good opportunities, which fortunately enough, just through probably more work ethic than necessarily smarts, I was able to take. But for the young practitioners that probably don't, and they probably hear people like you or me say, "Oh, you got to work hard," and perhaps don't realise what we had to go through. But yeah, it was a grind early on very little salary and eating very little. And
I can totally relate with that, because obviously, younger coaches, younger trainers will look at a resume like yours, for example, or maybe mine, and there's that old saying that overnight success takes 20 years, which I buy into.
Yes.
And obviously, I've listened to you on your podcast, the Burko and what's it called again?
Bruckner and Burjo.
There we go.
Burjo podcast. Yes.
I just have to throw it out there. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I think you're about 7 or 8 episodes in now, and I
appreciate that, Allistair.
Yeah, always super keen to listen to it. I listen to it on my bike rides, I listen to it on my runs and so on. But definitely the first 2 episodes, thoroughly enjoyed with you guys discussing your career and so on and so forth. And the thing that stood out there for me was the amount of you spoke about volunteering. You spoke about working other jobs. I relate with that as well, because definitely in my 20s it was hustling. It was doing, I was working for rugby teams on a Wednesday night and school teams on a Thursday, and getting paid, sometimes not getting paid. I remember a few of your stories there as well with regards the amount of distance you'd drive to places to volunteer and so on and so forth. And this is the reality. None of us just walked into the positions we're in at the moment, and you have to go out there and you have to hustle. You have to do work for free. You have to keep knocking doors. In fact, if I could just share one of the stories that you spoke about, is that you wrote 90 plus letters to football teams in the UK, right?
Yeah. When there was no internet and email, and so I think it was 94. I wrote to 93 clubs.
Love this story.
And received 4 letters back, which I really appreciate. Still remember the letters. I've probably still got them somewhere. And obviously that means 88 or 89 just ignored it, which is fair enough, because it would take a fair bit of effort to send a letter back to Australia to some young punk from Australia who wanted a job. So that was always the dream, and that's what I wanted to do. And while I was delivering pizzas and studying at uni, that's what I did. So
did you have a clear vision? Did you have a clear understanding of what you wanted to become and how far you wanted to go in the industry, Darren?
I think so. It's hard to know. But I don't think I set out and said, yes, I want to do that. But my dream was to work professionally in soccer. That was my dream. And whether that was in Australia or overseas. I didn't necessarily, but I must have ordered 150 books and DVDs on, online through in fact faxes and things like that, all on soccer drills and yeah, we'd just go and practice them on teams that I played for, and take sessions and things like that. So that was the dream, was to do that. And yeah, it was that and the academic side. I wanted to get a PhD. It was a big thing for my mum to do that. So I wanted to make sure I made her proud to do that. So yeah, that the dream was to work professionally. So probably the ultimately the first dream that I think I can remember is to work for the Australian national team, and to do that in a World Cup. I don't think it'll ever get better than that, to have that experience. So hopefully I'll have a better experience. I've still got a few years left in me, but yeah, that was probably the best one.
No, excellent, and we're going to chat about that just a little later on in the podcast as well. So, moving on to mentors, first of all, do you believe in mentors, and have you had a few in your lifetime or in your career?
Yeah, I have, and I believe in them. I don't know that it's the strict sort of definition that people think. It's a regular weekly catch up with a mentor who's 70 years old and guru sort of scenario. But I have a couple who I call on regularly, and one's passed away, which is quite sad. But probably my first one was a gentleman by the name of Phil Walsh, who was a coach in Aussie Rules. One of the smartest people I ever met. He passed away a few years ago, which was devastating on a number of fronts. A guy by the name of Kerry Evans, who's a performance psychiatrist who works with, amongst other teams, Mercedes, Formula One, Brooklyn Nets, Chicago Bears, New Zealand All Blacks. He's an absolute star in his field, and I speak to him really regularly. And the gentleman on the other end of the podcast that I'm lucky enough to be part of, Peter Bruckner, as well as one of the sort of preeminent sports physicians on the planet. We certainly speak at least a few times a week, just about all things performance and injuries and politics and everything. So they're probably the three that stand out for me. But I would consider a lot of people around the place. People in the UK, such as Dave Carolan and Tony Strudwick, who I speak to quite regularly. People in the US, Dave Tenney, who I speak to really regularly, just about all things performance. So not necessarily a mentor, but
some big names there.
The phone. Yeah, just pick up the phone at any time and say, listen, I've got this issue. What do you guys do? I'm recruiting. What do you look for? Do you know anyone? I've recently become really close with Stu McMillan from Altus, and he just has a perspective on things that I absolutely love. And so we would speak once every few weeks, and had a great time with him after I got sacked from Arsenal. Just spent most mornings with him, just talking all things performance, and that really helped me get through that period. So, yeah, there's a few people around the place that I speak to quite regularly.
Now, obviously, you've had a lot of success in your career, but tell us about maybe one or two failures that you've had.
Go ahead. Yeah, I've had plenty, Allistair. We could do a 5-part series. I think early on, the biggest problem that I had was I was obsessed with data, and I would make judgment calls based on really erroneous information and stuff that I shouldn't have trusted but did. So that was a really big mistake. Is I would be saying to coaches, no, you can only train for 23 minutes today, and if it went over, I would lose my shit on the sidelines and blame that for an injury or a loss that we might have had. So that was a big issue. I think as I went through my career and learnt a little bit more, a lot of the information was filtered out, so that sort of helped a lot. Some of the other mistakes I've made is I'm a big believer, Allistair, from getting a bit more technical, that the human body enjoys a rhythm of sort of exposure, and often if we'd had in the Premier League like a 7-day break in between games, I would go, I would take the foot off a little bit and give players an easy week. And I've found over time that doesn't work out that way, that, that development of chronic load, if you like, is really, really important. And if you disrupt that too much, it can have negative effects on performance and injuries and things like that. And probably the biggest mistake I've made throughout the early part of my career is to disrespect the mental side of things, and not pay enough attention to that. What's going on in a player's home life, what's going on in their contractual situation, what's going on in and around them that might be affecting performance. I've really come through some great work with some psychologists like Dave Priestley at Arsenal and others to really respect that side of things. So I would say that would be the biggest thing that I've learned in the last 4 or 5 years from an athletic performance side of things.
Now, obviously, being an Aussie, it must have been a great honour for you to work with the Australian national soccer team between 2007 and 2010. Tell us about the experience you had with the guys, obviously at the 2010 World Cup in South Africa.
Look, it was amazing. I learned so much then for a couple of different reasons. Firstly, we had a coach, Pim Verbeek, who's no longer with us, who was just one of the most gentle, humble, which is unusual for a lot of Dutchmen that I've met. But
I lived there for 7 years, so I feel you.
So you know
I hear
exactly
you. Yes.
what I'm talking about. Yeah.
They're a very proud nation.
Absolutely, and he was challenging early. Don't get me wrong. For 6 months, I would pass GPS and heart rate data under his hotel room door, and I didn't know what he was doing with them. But I would write little notes, rest him, look at this guy, and the next day I would get nothing from him because that was his demeanour. But once he thought, okay, yeah, this guy's in it for the right reasons. And so what he did in that time was, he said to me, look, Darren, you go anywhere in the world, learn whatever you want in between games. As long as you bring it back to Australia, we'll basically pay for it. So myself and Phil Coles, the physio who's now at Boston Celtics as performance director, we travelled all around the place, and I just knocked on doors anywhere and everywhere, and just learned so much by just watching people, and all throughout America, throughout South America and Europe, because Australian team only plays once a month. So it was just a brilliant learning experience. Secondly, we had to play we had to qualify through Asia for the first time. So we were playing in Oman and Bahrain and the middle of China in places called Kunming, close to the Tibetan border at 2,000 meters.
Oh.
Yeah, they played us at 2 p.m. during the day, which was 4 a.m. European time, because they knew most of our guys were coming from Europe. And so the learning experience to go and try and get the guys both from circadian rhythm to a travel to a temperature to we had a lot of guys who were big wigs in Europe, superstar players: Harry Kewell, Tim Cahill, Lucas Neal, Marcus Schwarzer, Vince Grella, Bresciano, coming from different parts of Europe and China.
Was Viduka there at that stage, or?
Unfortunately, I only got the tail end of Viduka. He retired after about a year of me in the
what a player he was
in the national team. Honestly, just that was a massive thrill for me to meet and work with him, because I was such a fan of his.
Tough player.
And for me, the most skillful Australian player I've worked with. He was
really
phenomenal, and he so navigating that qualification process was just incredible. I would go in to the referees and say, look, it's 52 degrees here. We cannot play. And they would, the Asian Federation referees would then take the temperature gauge that I was showing them, go into their air-conditioned room and say, oh, it's only 32, we're good to go. So you can imagine going through that process was tough. So, but I learnt a lot, and then we went to South Africa, and we were based at altitude just outside of Joburg.
Okay.
And
Where I was brought up.
And yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Look, we're in an amazing sort of fishing village, a resort called Klufsik, and it was just an incredible place. And so yeah, it was. I must have gone there 9 or 10 times to scout different places, depending on where we were drawn and who we were drawn against. And the World Cup itself, we got 4 points from our group, which was pretty good. But unfortunately, we lost 4-0 to Germany in the first round, and that sort of killed off our chances. So we didn't progress through goal difference. But incredible experience, loved every minute of it, and learnt a lot.
Now, obviously,
worked with some amazing people too.
Well, I mean, just listening to the last 20, 25 minutes, just the names that you've brought up and the type of people that are in your network. I mean, it's those are just massive, massive names in the industry. Following Australia, you ended up at one of the biggest clubs in the world, Liverpool, which is my team. And no, I just didn't jump on the bus. I've been a fan
Jump
since...
on the bandwagon last couple of years.
Yeah, exactly. No, I since the age of 5, and I can prove that. So,
yeah.
But massive fan, obviously, since the days of Kenny Dalglish and
Sure.
Ian Rush and Bruce Grobbelaar, and that was my team growing up. So, what are the names there? Ronnie Whelan. I mean, we're going back here a long time. But
John Barnes and those guys.
John Barnes, sure. Yep. McManaman. Oh, so many names. But tell us how that came about.
Yeah, that came about through Peter Bruckner. He was commissioned to do a bit of a investigation into why the CEO felt that they were not maximising their talent and getting injuries and things like that. So Brookie went in and spent a month there, and then sort of came back and said, "Look, I think perhaps you might need some help in the fitness and physio department." So he made some recommendations, and I interviewed for a job that they made available, and was lucky enough to get the job. Obviously, heavily influenced by Peter's recommendation, and then literally left the World Cup in South Africa 2 days later. Flew straight from Johannesburg to Manchester Airport, and got there on a Saturday and started training on a Monday. During the World Cup, Rafa Benitez had been sacked, so we had no coach, we had no assistant coach. Rafa took 18 Spanish staff with him.
Wow, that's a clean out.
Oh, it was a clean out. There was no data on anybody. There's a couple. I found a couple of heart rate tracers on a Spanish computer that I had to try and translate to find any information on the players. And
not the easiest start, by the sounds of it.
No, it wasn't a great start, and it was myself, Phil Coles, Peter Bruckner, and that was it. So we spent the weekend recruiting teams. And
who was the manager at that stage? Obviously, Rafa left. Was it Kenny?
So no, there was no manager for the first 2 weeks of pre-season, and then Roy Hodgson was given the job, and he lasted maybe 5 months, and then 6 months, and then Kenny came in, and we had 18 months with Kenny.
How was it working? How was it working under Kenny?
Yeah, it was amazing. The revere which he was held in that city is just legendary, as you know.
Yeah.
Kenny was more the managerial type. And he would trust that in his coaches, which was Steve Keane and Kevin Keane, and Steve Clark, and I worked really closely with those guys in setting up sessions, and they were really good to work with. And Kenny would come in and trust us to sort of run the session, and come in and sort of select the team and be more of a man manager than necessarily the coach. But we had some success. We won the Carling Cup and made the FA Cup final. Did okay in the Europa League, but that was a really tough time because there was a change of ownership. There was no money to buy players with which Liverpool, of the calibre that Liverpool were used to. So it was a pretty brutal time, particularly sitting through when both Roy and Kenny got let go, because as you know, you're never sure if you're going to hold on to your job. Damien Kamoli, my boss, got let go as well. So, and Peter Bruckner, same thing happened to him. So it was a tough period. You sort of didn't know whether you were coming or going.
Yeah, not a lot of stability there, huh?
At
that stage.
Yeah, that's right, and it's great to see what Liverpool have done. There's still some people there that I worked with that have lasted the journey, and it's just amazing to see the success that we were perhaps the start of, but didn't get to see it through. But there's some really smart people behind the scenes there doing some really good things. So really excited for them.
Then it was Brendan Rodgers that came in, and he obviously did a
Yep.
great job as well. Obviously, you had players like the caliber of Suarez there. You had obviously Steven Gerrard. How was it to work under Brendan?
Yeah, Brendan was great. He came in. My first conversation with Brendan wasn't a pleasant one. He said, "Look, I wanted you sacked." Literally, the first thing he
Okay.
said to me, I wanted to bring my guy in, which is understandable. So,
Yeah.
but then we developed a really good relationship, and um, he has a certain way of working, which is based on a sort of a mesh of a Spanish Portuguese model, and so it was a really fast learning experience for me to work within that model and adapt my philosophies to his. He has a head of performance called Glenn Driscoll, and we worked really closely together. Got along really well with him, and that was a great experience. And of course, my time at Liverpool was highlighted by working with people like Steven Gerrard, Luis Suarez, Fernando Torres, Maxi Rodriguez, Dirk Kuyt, Pepe Reina.
Oh wow. Mascherano.
Just some really. Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get to work with him too long. He left pretty early on in the piece, but yeah, just some really just to watch them, and they were good before I got there. I can't claim anything to do with them, so please. I know it sounds like I'm name dropping, but I was just lucky enough to watch them really, and to get to know how they operate, and that was the highlight of my time at Liverpool for sure, along with the birth of my two kids who are both proud Scousers.
There
So
we
I
go.
enjoyed that. Yeah, so
Tell me,
that was a highlight.
tell me out of your time there, because obviously I know you worked at Arsenal as well. But who were the players that impressed you the most with regards work ethic?
Certainly Steven Gerrard. He just because of his leadership on and off the field, as well as his work ethic, was phenomenal. Um, Luis Suarez's ability to work through any kind of, we'd scanned him and he'd have grade 1 and in one instance grade 2 hamstring injuries, and he would just play. Say, no, I'll play. He was obscene from that point of view. The commitment that people like Granit Xhaka and Hector Bellerin at Arsenal have to their bodies and the lengths that they will go to perform well and to put themselves up for selection each week were really impressive. Guys like Rob Holding and Danny Welbeck, despite numerous setbacks at Arsenal, their attitude and commitment to training was unbelievable. And then from a pure athletic point of view, watching someone like Fernando Torres, and we probably didn't get him at his best, but watching him move and run and glide across the park was a real pleasure to watch. And that's just to name a few. I could go on all day just watching guys like I remember Mesut Ozil tore Australia apart in the World Cup. I just thought, who is he? I didn't know much about him in 2010, but getting to watch him day to day just take the piss out of teammates was just was unbelievable, and myself on many occasions. I'd just be meandering along and he'd nutmeg me 3 and 4 times, which is not that hard. So yeah, watching him and Alexis Sanchez, the skills that they displayed at training was awesome.
Yeah, wow, you've been around some massive names there, some incredible players.
Yeah, I've been very lucky, Aubameyang, Lacazette, those guys, watching their striking practice. I was lucky enough to spend half the time crossing the balls to those guys, and them making the most of my meager crosses was outstanding.
If you could just say, what are one or two things that made Steven Gerrard such a good leader?
Yeah, it was both on and off the field. It didn't matter who you were, he would hold you to the highest regard. From the very start, for the highest standards. I'm sorry. So no matter, I remember him telling Fernando Torres, for instance, when he wore his shoes into the training ground, hey, we take those off. We don't wear those into the training ground. We don't want to dirty the facility. When I very first met him and said, these are things that we're going to do. This is how we're going to prolong your career. This is what, the strategies we're going to employ. And he just sort of looked at the end of the meeting. He just said, okay, we'll see. I'll give you 6 months. And he doesn't suffer any fools. And he just said, yeah, talk is cheap. We'll see by actions.
High standards.
High standards across the board, which I was lucky enough to spend a few days with him up at Rangers as well. And he holds his players to those standards now. So I remember many arguments in the change room between players afterwards about performance, and Stevie would just let them go. And then right at the end, he'd say, all right, we've had enough. It ends here. We don't hold grudges. We turn up tomorrow and train, and we're all friends again. And that was it. And that was exactly how it went. So, yeah, his standards on and off the field were just extraordinary.
I noticed
watching him play five-a-side games, he just refused to lose. So it was just great that he had that both on and off the field.
Yeah, a total example. I was actually up at Rangers in February with obviously Jordan Milsom and
Yes.
Michael Bale. He's brought a few of the Liverpool guys there with him as well. But we had lunch with Stephen, and I got to spend a day at the facility there chatting to the guys. And something that really stood out for me was just like he has an aura. He's calm. He's not that loud coach or has to make an appearance. Also, what stood out for me was, I was leaving there at 7:00 in the evening, and it was maybe about 5 or 6 people left in the building, and he was in the gym by himself, working out, and that's just something I just thought. And he still looks as fit as he did when he played.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I love what you said there about a calm demeanour. No matter what he said, it was always measured and calm and intentional and direct as well. And I think that'll translate to him being an amazing coach.
Yeah, I always compare him to, if your aeroplane was going down, you'd want Steven Gerrard to be in the cockpit.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. and he's got a fairly influential fan base up there to work with in Scotland. So, he's done an amazing job with the talent that he's got. Yeah, absolutely.
Not easy.
As has Jordan Milsom working with him. He's a star.
Yeah, I mean, it's just obviously the rivalry of two clubs like Celtic and Rangers and the history. It's not an easy job to be in by any means,
No.
From that side, the pressure side of it. So I know we're pushed for a little bit of time, so I'm going to jump a few questions here, and I think definitely I'm going to have you back on. Because there's a whole lot of things I'd love to ask you, but this has been great so far. Let's have a look at books you're reading right now. Any particular books that you'd recommend?
Yeah, I sort of jump between podcasts and books, I've just finished off The Inner Game of Tennis, which is an old one by Tim Galway. It's a long, long time ago, but I've been recommended that by a few people, and absolutely love that. And
Steve Kerr, obviously of the Warriors, reads that book every year before NBA season.
Yeah, exactly, and I can see why. You can tell it's not dated, but you can tell it's old. But what's incredible about it is a lot of the things that have become a little bit cool and hip amongst the performance industry, in terms of stoicism and applying various psychological principles and even economic principles to performance. Galway was saying this 20 years ago, and then some.
I think it was written in 75, actually.
Yeah, well, there you go. I'll just embarrass myself, but that long ago, So the other book that was written about the same time, which I've actually just passed on to a few players really recently, is the name has just escaped me. The Road Less Travelled by Scott Peck, which was written in 74 as well,
Okay.
or 75, and get on that, because that was, I discovered that purely through accident, and it's a tough one. It's a real self-reflecting book, and I've just reread it. And I spoke about it a while ago with a guy called Ian McEwen, who I would also class as a professional who works at Port Adelaide, doing an amazing job there. So the road, which is what Nick is algorithms to live by. First, and I heard a guy who looked up, Darren from Rock, about it, podcast, and it's a bit more technical, but just talks about applying the various statistics to life.
What was that last book there? So we had a little bit of a bad break there.
Sorry, it's called Algorithms to Live By.
Okay, and that other book was The Road Less Traveled.
The Road Less Traveled, yeah. Okay. Like I said, it's a tough one, really tough one.
Okay.
And I had to reread many paragraphs, but a really good one for self-reflection.
Talking about podcasts, have you listened to The Flying Coach? That's Pete Carroll and Steve Kerr.
Yeah, superb.
Yeah, good.
Absolutely superb. Yeah, any time you can hear people of that caliber just talk about anything, and they spoke about the Black Lives Matter, and spoke about a whole range of different things. So
two very intelligent guys. Two very
Absolutely.
intelligent, and obviously Greg Popovich.
You can see why they've been successful.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Any podcast recommendations?
And I don't say this lightly, but other than yourself, I really enjoy your podcast. I'll just pull up the podcast. I like Finding Mastery, Michael Gervais. I'm just going through Seth Godin's. I love his Akimbo. That really makes me think a little bit differently, and just reminds me how little I know about the world. I certainly listen to the TED Talks daily. And I've really been getting into the Knowledge Project, which by Shane Parrish, which just looks at various things, predominantly psychology. Anytime I can listen to, no doubt someone you know well, Ross Tucker, the Science of Sport podcast, I take that. And I've recently got into On Being as well. So they would be the ones that I was on recently, the Scott Livingston Leave Your Mark, and so I've been enjoying that as well. So there's a few to get people going.
Awesome stuff. Now I know you have to run. You've got a big day ahead of you, but if anybody would like to reach out to you, any social media platforms that you have that they could follow?
Yeah, probably Twitter's the best bit. I've been on there a little bit lately, just promoting the Brookie and Burjo podcast, but I'm at Darren Burgess 25.
Okay.
And honestly, I thoroughly enjoy reaching out to anybody in the industry. So just send a message, and I'm really happy to talk shop at any time. Obviously, it's pretty busy at the moment, but the season's going to finish soon enough, and we'll probably have 2 or 3 months off, so I can't travel anywhere. So I'd certainly love to touch base with anybody and everybody, and debate and discuss anything. So happy for people to reach out at any time.
Awesome, Darren. You're not only obviously a coach or a performance coach with a massive reputation, but you're also one of the top guys as well. I don't think I've met anybody that's had a bad word about you. So there you go.
I appreciate that. I'm sure if you search far enough, you'll find plenty, but I appreciate you saying so anyway.
Yeah, good stuff. And obviously your podcast, Brokey and Burgo as well. So if you guys haven't subscribed to that yet, subscribe to it. It's on my phone. I see there's a new show out as well that I'll be listening to on tomorrow morning's run.
I appreciate the recommendation coming from yourself. That means a lot to us.
I love it. I love it. It's just raw, and obviously you've had so much experience, both you and Peter. So thanks for putting it out there. All right, I'll let you go. You have a great day. Thanks again, Darren, for taking the time and for sharing your wisdom and experience with us.
Thanks, I really appreciate it, mate. Keep up the great work.
Cheers, Darren. Thanks.
Cheers, mate.
So there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed that one with Darren Burgess. Remember, this podcast is available on iTunes and on YouTube. Also, remember, just released Champion Minded on Audible as well. So it's not just in the paperback and Kindle form, but it's now on Audible. Check that out. Connect with me on social media, on Twitter, at Allistair McCall, on Facebook, Allistair McCall page, and on Instagram, Be Champion Minded. Massive, massive thanks once again to all of you who have taken the time to leave a review, a rating. I greatly appreciate that. I love all the comments. Thanks for sharing on social media, etc. Until the next episode, as always, you were made for greatness. Now go do the work. Stay champion minded.